Her genealogy chart, according to the College of Heralds in London, traces her blue bloodline back to Abraham, who many modern scholars believe to be the Egyptian pharaoh, Amenemhet I.
Queen Elizabeth can trace her bloodline back to pharaohs in ancient Egypt? And as I went over in part 1 of this documentary, all of the United States presidents, as well as many who ran for the United States presidency like Hillary Clinton, and all of the current ruling European monarchs are also related to Queen Elizabeth II. So does this mean
The world's biggest and best-kept secret is that the descendants of the Hebrew pharaohs of Egypt have ruled throughout history. Over the millennia, they have left oceans of blood in their wake. They have murdered, cheated, slaughtered, robbed, colonized, and enslaved to fulfill their biblical covenants for an eternal throne and one world empire.
You guys came. Who wants the grand tour?
The excerpt that you just heard comes from part 2 of my The Club Uncensored documentary. If you haven't seen it, it can be found in my playlist section under, I believe, The Club Uncensored. Yep, right there. Now anyway, the reason why I started this video off with that excerpt, and the reason why I'm talking about this right now, is because I recently came across a news article that sort of confirms something that I talk about in part 4 of my The Club Uncensored documentary. And I apologize to everyone, this documentary is incomplete. There's supposed to be at least 4 other parts to this documentary, but I had to cut it off at part 5. It sort of continues, I sort of touch upon a couple of things in these 2 videos that would have been discussed in future parts of the documentary, but I had to cut it off. I still have all the data for part 6, part 7, part 8, and part 9, but I can't cover any future parts because I know for a fact that what I discuss in part 6 will get me canceled. So I've pretty much have left it there. I still have it on the back burner. Maybe sometime in the future, when I don't have to worry about being canceled, I'll cover future parts of this documentary. But anyway, without further delay, let me cover the news articles that I came across that confirm something that or at least sort of confirm something that I discuss in part 4. So we have this article here. This is from The Archaeologist, Civilizations of the World. So this article is from 2022. The Nile Shipwreck is first evidence that Herodotus wasn't lying about Egyptian boats. A sunken ship found in the Nile River may have lain undisturbed for over 2,500 years, but now it is finally ponying up its secrets. Scientists think that this ship has revealed a structure whose existence has been debated for centuries. In fragment 2.96 of Herodotus's Histories, published around 450 BCE, the ancient Greek historian, who was writing about his trip to Egypt, describes a type of Nile cargo boat called a barus. According to his portrayal, it was constructed like brickwork, lined with papyrus, and with a rudder that passed through a hole in the keel. This steering system had been seen in representations and models through the Pharaonic period, but we had no firm archaeological evidence of its existence until now. Enter Ship 17 of the now sunken port city Thonis Heraklion near the canopic mouth of the Nile, dated to the late period 664 to 332 BCE. Here, researchers have been exploring over 70 shipwrecks, discovering countless artifacts that reveal stunning details about the ancient trade hub and its culture. Anyway, I'm not going to read all of this here. This is sort of a model of the ship. Anyway, if you want to read more of this article, you can. But let's fast forward 2 years, because this is speculation. This is the first evidence of it. So if you fast forward to pretty much this week, this is November 22nd, 2024. The article was published. I'm recording this video November 24th, 2024. Egyptian shipwreck proves ancient Greek historian Herodotus right. Before I move on from this article and kind of talking about what I really want to talk about in this video, which is something that I mentioned in the Club Uncensored documentary, I want to quickly comment on two things in this article. The first thing I want to comment on is this paragraph right here. For centuries, scholars and archaeologists believe that the type of ship Herodotus described never actually existed because such ships had never once been discovered by anyone on Earth. Like anywhere on Earth. Okay, very interesting stuff. Nowhere on Earth do you find ships like this. Like, not in the archaeological record. Now, I believe the case here, the real reason why I think that they doubted him, is because they wanted to cast doubt on other claims that he made, on other things that he documented, one of which I will be talking about shortly. And evidence for this theory of mine can actually be found in this article we just looked at, right here. This steering system had been seen in representations and models through the Pharaonic period, but we had no firm archaeological evidence of its existence until now. So not only did Herodotus write about these things, we actually had pictorial evidence all throughout the Pharaonic period. This means that there are illustrations of these steering systems, of basically these boats. So this means that it's unreasonable for them to cast doubt. They were simply casting doubt because they're like, oh, well, we need physical evidence. Yeah, we have the physical illustrations, but we want actual physical archaeological evidence. Really, they were just trying to cast doubt on what Herodotus wrote about here because they're afraid that if he's right about this, then he's right about other things that he documented. The other thing that I want to talk about that's covered in this article is this statement right here. Archaeologists believe that what Herodotus saw... Oh, I'm sorry, that's not it. Where is it? The wood. Oh, here we go. I'm sorry, I was one paragraph off. Most likely, this unique method of construction was the reason why Herodotus was so amazed when he saw this type of ship. The renowned historian was also astonished by the peculiar types of wood they were using to construct the ships, which had been completely unknown to him. Now, this right here really intrigues me. I'm curious if they know what type of wood this is. I want to know if they've tracked down the type of tree that they used in the construction of these ships. This is interesting to me because I believe, I have a theory, that this ancient civilization that really started off in ancient Egypt, or not started off, but that popped up out of nowhere in ancient Egypt, and that popped up out of nowhere in ancient Mesopotamia, actually came from Antarctica. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize. Ancient Egypt, when you look at its history, the pyramids, its greatest constructions and stuff, were built at the beginning of the civilization, not later on. So it's like you have this very advanced civilization that popped up out of nowhere that actually began to decline, like they were losing knowledge as they were going on. Now, I believe what actually happened was, as I said, this group came from Antarctica when Antarctica was ice-free. I think that they realized that the weather, that the climate was shifting in the world, and they decided to leave Antarctica and then move northward into the Middle East, into the Nile Valley region, and into where ancient Mesopotamia was in basically southern Iraq. I think you had two groups that went to this area, and they went in there very advanced. And I believe, or I at least wouldn't be surprised, if the wood was unknown to him because the wood actually came from Antarctica. That's just a theory of mine. Now, why is this important? Why am I talking about this? Well, let's go back to my The Club Uncensored documentary. As I said, I mentioned something in part 4 of this documentary, and that is this account of Herodotus about an Egyptian pharaoh named Sesostris. So I'm going to quickly read this right off of my video here, because I'm pretty confident if I try to check Wikipedia for this information now, it's going to take me even more time, and I wouldn't be surprised if this information has been altered since I recorded this video, I believe way back in 2017. This video is pretty old. Let's see, I published it 6 years ago, and I gathered the information for it 7 years ago. So let's quickly read this account of Herodotus. In Herodotus' histories, there appears a story told by Egyptian priest about a pharaoh, Sesostris, who once led an army northward overland to Asia Minor, then fought his way westward until he crossed into Europe, where he defeated the Scythians and Thracians, possibly in modern Romania and Bulgaria. Sesostris then returned home, leaving colonists behind at the river Phasis and Colchis. Herodotus cautioned the reader that much of this story came secondhand via Egyptian priests, but also noted that the Colchians were commonly known to be Egyptian colonists. According to Diodorus Siculus, who calls him Sisusis, and Strabo, he conquered the whole world, even Scythia and Ethiopia, divided Egypt into administrative districts or nomes, was a great lawgiver, and introduced a caste system into Egypt and the worship of Serapis. Serapis is like a serpent, it's a snake, which perfectly suits these soulless snake demons that we're dealing with. Herodotus also relates that when Sesostris defeated an army without much resistance, he erected a pillar in their capital with a vagina on it to symbolize the fact that the army fought like women. Now, this is what I really want to cover. This is something very interesting I, of course, covered in this documentary. But what I want to say is, if Herodotus has been proven right about his observation of these Egyptian vessels, it's very likely that this story that was told to him secondhand was also very accurate. Now, what's interesting, though, is these pillars, we actually see them in our modern-day world. And these pillars are, of course, the obelisk that exist in the capital cities of London, Washington, D.C., and even the Vatican. So what's interesting is if you look at these pillars, or these obelisks, you can actually find this vagina symbolism. Now, is it directly on them? I don't know, but it would be interesting to go and make observations of these obelisks to see if you can find vagina symbolism directly on them. However, we can see vagina symbolism basically around them. So here's the pillar, which is basically a phallic symbol. And if you look at the floor, this circle over here, I believe I interpret it as that vagina symbol that Herodotus was alluding to. And you will find this at many obelisks. This is the one at the Vatican, and it's actually the whole area here could be considered a vagina symbol because of its structure. Same thing is true, though, with the Washington Monument. Obviously, a modern obelisk, a giant phallic symbol, serves no other purpose. It has no utility other than to show that we fought like women. And look at that right at the bottom. You have this sort of vagina symbolism. And what's interesting, you actually have concentric rings here. You have like a ring, and then like an outer ring, and then a big circle here. And then, of course, actually, look at this. I just noticed this right here. Look at that right there. Definitely vagina symbolism. Same thing is true, actually, in the city of London. You have this Cleopatra's Needle. However, the Cleopatra's Needle, it's right at the water edge, and it doesn't seem to have any direct vagina symbolism underneath it, like we have with these other obelisks. However, it does sit in a very peculiar place. If you look at it from Google Earth, it sort of sits in between these two bridges or these two passages, which can be interpreted as legs, but it's also on this canal. And it's known, I believe Jordan Maxwell talks about the birth canal when he's talking about the law of the land and the law of the seas. By the way, I don't trust Jordan Maxwell, but it's interesting that it sits right here in the middle on this canal, this birth canal. So even here, although it might be kind of a stretch, it appears to have this vagina symbolism around it. I would have to go there and observe the area to kind of see for myself what other symbolism is on this obelisk and on the base of the obelisk, and maybe what these statues are, and even the kind of formation of these pillars and this whole waterway here. But I would not be surprised if there's a great deal of vagina symbolism here. What's interesting, though, is that this is called Cleopatra's Needle. There's actually two Cleopatra Needles. There's one Cleopatra Needle in London, and then there's another Cleopatra Needle that I didn't even know about in Central Park, New York City. This is a satellite image of that needle. And I found that I just happened to stumble across this page. So Bronxville high school teacher Jess Marcus recently posed an interesting problem that turned out to be more challenging than it seems at first glance. At GoogleEarth.com, find Cleopatra's Needle in Central Park in New York City. It's just west of the Metropolitan Museum of Art between East 81st and East 82nd Street on Fifth Avenue. From the shadow cast by the needle and any other clues in the image, can you determine the approximate time and date that the image was made? So I guess this is like, I suppose he's saying that it can be used as a sundial. Use any and all resources available, except, of course, looking up at the date of the image. But anyway, so this page has something to do with something completely different. However, if we look at this needle, we see more vagina symbolism there. Is this a stretch? I don't know. Maybe we should ask Herodotus. I'd like to finish off this video by commenting on Matt Gaetz, because I came across this image, and I know I'm going to take a huge digression here. This is the end of the video. If you guys don't want to see this, you don't have to. But I came across this image of Matt Gaetz, and I believe this might be his underage lover. I'm not exactly sure, but I believe it is. And what's interesting, I saw this image, and it hit me. I was like, I know why Matt Gaetz looks so familiar. Like, I saw this guy, and it just, like, struck a chord with me. Every time I look at him, I'm like, he looks sort of familiar. When I see him, it's almost like a type of deja vu. Remember, I said he looks like a demon in a rubber mask in my last video. And then when I saw this video, it was mostly her teeth over here. If you look, she's a very gummy person. She's one of those people with more gums than teeth. And that's fine. Some people are like that. I don't judge you for that. However, when I saw this image, it just immediately hit me. I was like, I know where I've seen this face before. It was in the movie They Live. He looks just like these characters. I tried finding a picture of the president in They Live, because the president, of course, is in a suit very similar to Matt Gaetz' suit. But man, does he look so much like those creatures. But anyway, I'm going to end the video here. I got a lot of stuff to do today. As always, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay sharp.
That was a hell of a thing. What's wrong with them? I don't know. Come on.